Okay, good morning. So again, my name is Maggie Christofferson, and I'm here from the Alzheimer's Association. I just want to mention that I'm not a legal and financial expert. So we really want to give you the tools and the tips and the resources, but I just want to make sure that you're well aware I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but we're going to go ahead and go through some resources for you. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Erica will be looking at the chat, and we will take time at the end for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and let's make sure. Does everybody see that? Painless planning for difficult choices. Give me a thumbs up if you see it. Okay, all right. So just really quickly, our mission is to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research to provide enhanced care and support for all those that are affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's. What we're going to go over today is the importance of legal and financial planning when it comes to younger onset Alzheimer's. We're going to talk about how to put plans into place. We're going to talk about how to plan for possible loss of income, some legal documents that need to be put into place, financial healthcare costs while you're still working, and resources. We have a lot of resources for you. I want to give you a little warning. I have a dog that loves to bark when I'm doing webinars. So my son is on spray patrol right now. So if you hear barking, it should stop quickly. I don't know if any of you guys have that going on right now, but there's nothing I can do about it. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of planning early. You know, discussing legal and financial issues is not really on the top of most people's list of fun things to talk about. And a lot of people put this off. I would say that the majority of people put this off because it's difficult and it's time consuming and it's hard to think about, and it can be, maybe expensive to put these things together. But it is really important to start planning as early as possible. I heard one of my volunteers, or our volunteers, talk about helping her father. Her father had Alzheimer's disease, and she was helping him through the process of legal and financial planning. And what she told him really made sense to me. She said, let's pretend like we're going on a trip. And if we were going on a road trip, we would be planning our destinations. We would be planning where we were staying. We would be deciding how much money to have. We would be planning, how much gas we needed and where we would stop for food. So we would be making a plan. And so, she was talking about really just treating this journey kind of like a trip. And so the earlier we plan, the better it's going to go. So there's a lot of complex issues when it comes to legal and financial issues. And, the earlier we plan, the earlier we are going to be able to understand them and put them in place. It also allows the person living with the disease a degree of self-determination, a degree of choice. It allows for their preferences to be heard and honored. As a caregiver, I cared for people at the end of their life, and I had the privilege of caring for people who got to plan, who got to have a say, who got to tell their family what they wanted. And I also took care of people who didn't. And it just seemed to me that the folks that got a say in what they wanted had so much peace. And it just gives people, a voice. Starting early really means that your wishes are more likely to be honored by others. No one has to wonder. One of the things I heard a lot when I was a caregiving instructor is I would hear families talk about how there was a lot of fighting, that there was a lot of conflict, that people were really upset with each other because one person thought mom wanted this and the other person thought mom wanted that. And when we give our families the gift of a plan, a health directive, a power of attorney, a financial plan, a trust, we are giving them a gift, because we're already making the decisions. We're already making our wishes known. They don't have to wonder. I had other family members who would say, you know, my mom can no longer communicate, and I don't know if this is what she would want. And I don't know if this is if I'm doing the right thing. So some of those difficult consequences of waiting, you know, they come when we've waited too long to make those plans. There's this idea of legal capacity, and legal capacity just means that you are still able to make rational and sound judgments. And you want to have your wishes known and your wishes documented while you're still able to do that. And I tell you, we could go on about importance of planning all day, but let's move on. So there's some goals of legal planning. It helps us make legal and long-term care plans. It lets us make plans for finances and property. Okay, good, there's my notes. It also helps us designate someone to make decisions when we are no longer able to. So these are the goals of legal planning. And, you know, this is what the outcome we really want is to make sure all these things are done. Okay. So some common dementia planning forms. So there's a power of attorney for finances. There's a power of attorney for healthcare. There's a healthcare directive. And there's a POLST form. And we're going to go through all four. And don't worry, we can email these slides to you. This is being recorded. So if you feel like you're not getting all the information, we will make sure that you get it. So don't feel that you have to hurry and take notes. All right. And since this is so complex, normally when I present, I don't look at my notes. I kind of remember what I'm doing. But this is so complex, and I am so invested in getting this correct for you guys that I will be taking a look at my notes and making sure that I'm getting everything I want you to have. Okay, so a power of attorney for finances allows you to choose a trusted friend or relative to make your financial decisions when you no longer can. And the power of attorney should be written so it is durable, and durable means lasting. Normal power of attorneys, like, you know, if I was out of the country, I could give somebody power of attorney to sign a document. That's not durable. That's not lasting. And normal power of attorneys, if it doesn't say durable, once the person becomes incapacitated, so once they lose that legal capacity, that power of attorney is void. It's not legal anymore. So it has to say durable. So when you choose a power of attorney, there are some considerations to think about. It should probably be someone who lives nearby. It's much easier if somebody lives nearby, if they need to sign something, if they need to go to the bank, if they need to talk to a financial advisor. It's a little bit easier now because everything's virtual. You know, maybe if they had a way to do an electronic signature, that might work. But it would still be a lot easier if the person lived nearby. We also want to make sure that that person is trustworthy. So think about how they've handled, you know, big responsibilities in the past, how they've handled, you know, their own money. You know, what's that gut feeling? You know, somebody may be saying, hey, make me your power of attorney. And if your stomach says, well, I don't think so, then that probably shouldn't be your person. And then the last one is to make sure that they can be assertive. So if they don't, you know, if they're not good at standing up to people, so they don't like, you know, maybe they're really shy away from conflict, and maybe they aren't, you know, maybe they aren't the person that you want making decisions about your finances. So that's something to think about. You know, oftentimes we'll just make our oldest child our power of attorney, or, you know, a spouse our power of attorney. but really you want to think about who's going to be looking out for your best interest. So when we talk about power of attorney for healthcare, this is another place where you really need to think long and hard. This document designates that someone gets to make medical and end-of-life decisions for you. They can make a lot of different decisions for you. Some of the decisions that they get to make is they get to choose if you want to be put on a ventilator. They get to choose, I mean, you are the one that makes these choices, but they get to execute that choice. So they get to deny consent or offer consent for treatments that you've already authorized. They get to decide what medical facilities you go to, which doctors you see, which medical professionals you see. And so again, this should really be somebody that is trustworthy, somebody that probably lives close to you, someone that is comfortable making these decisions, and somebody that has a little bit of, they don't have to be a doctor, but they do need to have a little bit of medical knowledge. And they also need to be assertive. There's been many times where I have seen people get kind of run over by their doctors. Their doctor wants to do something, or their medical team wants to do something, and they will kind of push and push until the person, maybe acquiesces. And so it's a really good idea to have somebody that is your power of attorney for healthcare really able to be assertive and say, no, they don't want that, or yes, they do want that. So this is something to really consider. Who is going to be making these healthcare choices for you that you would have been making yourself? Okay. So a healthcare directive form is a really great form that really everybody should fill out, regardless of how your health is, because what it does is it allows you to choose what kind of medical treatments you do or you don't want to have. So again, we go back to, if somebody is, they're not breathing, or there is no pulse, do they want to be resuscitated? Do they want to be put on a ventilator? Do they want nutritional services? So if they can't eat for themselves, do they want to be tube fed, or do they want to have hydration? Does somebody want comfort care at the end of life? So a healthcare is really a personal decision, right? Everybody has to decide what they want and what they don't want. Everyone's quality of life is completely different. So for one person, it may be fine to go through all of these life-saving measures. And for another person, that might just be too much. They would rather just pass away. So it really is important that you are making your wishes known, and that you're choosing that power of attorney for medical decisions that's going to make sure those choices are followed. All right. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't think so. Okay, let's talk about a POLST form. So a POLST form is a physician's order of life-sustaining treatment. It's bright green, and it's not actually a healthcare directive. It's a different form than a healthcare directive. It's a set of physician's orders, and it tells first responders, like paramedics, but then it will also tell the doctors at the hospital what kind of treatment you want in a medical emergency and what kind of treatment you don't want. So POLST tells all healthcare providers what you want in the event of a medical emergency. And I've been told by EMTs that a DNR is not really anywhere near as effective as a POLST. A DNR just says that if the person isn't breathing or if they don't have a pulse, they don't want to be resuscitated. But a DNR doesn't say anything about, you know, if the person remains unconscious and when they get to the hospital, they eventually stop breathing, they don't want to be put on a ventilator. So a POLST is much more detailed, and it really gives a lot of good detailed information, again, not just to the paramedics, but also to the doctors once that person gets to the hospital. It must be signed by a physician. All right. I don't want to be going too fast, but I want to make sure we get all the information. So let's switch a little bit from kind of legal and healthcare to finances, and really thinking about how to plan for care, not just for right now, but possibly also down the road. And again, this is not something that people like to think about. They don't like to think about the fact that they may need caregivers in their home, that they may need long-term care. But dementia is a progressive disease. Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. I'm going to correct myself because not all dementia is progressive, but Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. So your chances of your loved one or yourself needing care are very high, and it varies, right? So when you start to think about this, you might start to think about, well, what would be the lowest level of care we need, right? So not everybody with Alzheimer's becomes non-ambulatory or starts to have issues with eating or wanders or has safety issues, but some people do. So what is the lowest level of care you may need? And then what is the highest level of care that you may need? There are many people that do need to go into memory care facilities because of safety issues, because family cannot come and care for them, because it's gotten to be too difficult, because they're, you know, maybe falling or having a hard time eating. And so to start to think about what resources do we have now that could pay for this care? Starting to think about what can you already tap into, and then what additional resources might we need. And one of the things I noticed as a caregiver and teaching caregivers is that few people will start to get a caregiver or start to look at facilities way after they should have been. I would go into houses where people had just, they finally said, okay, I need a caregiver. And being in their house and being around them, they really should have had a caregiver about 6 months before. When you're living with somebody that is progressing slowly, or you yourself are progressing slowly, you may not start to see the signs that extra care is needed. And I know that, you know, my stepmom has Alzheimer's, and she was diagnosed in 2017. And my dad and I are talking quite a bit about, you know, when are you going to get a caregiver? And, you know, I think he should have got a caregiver a couple months ago, and he's not there yet. And so by the time he finally does decide, right, he might, it would have been easier to make the decision earlier. So let's look at costs. Now, this is kind of a scary slide. I feel like I should have warned you before I put this up here. But paying for long-term care services is not cheap. So when we talk about long-term care services, we talk about home care, and a median amount for a paid non-medical home care aide is around $23 an hour. And it's a little over $1,000 a week. They also folks offer adult day services, which is a safe place for your loved one to go where they will get meals, they'll get enrichment, they'll get, companionship, and it's about $75 per day. Assisted living facilities start at about a little over $4,000. It equals out to about $48,000 a year. However, that's just kind of entry-level assisted living facilities. That's not memory care. Memory care can run anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a month. So a private room in a nursing home can be $280 a day, and a semi-private room can be anywhere from about $247 per day. And as we know, these are just the median amounts. It can go way higher, and it can also go lower. So this is just really just kind of an estimate. Okay. So thinking about personal resources, how to pay for all of this. So it could come from income and from employment. You may be able to tap into retirement plans. You may be able to tap into your savings and your assets. Sometimes you can tap into home equity or do reverse mortgages. And we also can go and find long-term care insurance. Although it's very hard to find long-term care insurance after somebody, I don't even think you can get long-term care insurance if somebody has already been diagnosed. Now, all of those things I listed, especially long-term care insurance, reverse mortgages, savings and assets, all of those things are really complicated, and they really, the need for a financial planner that specializes in, end of life or specializes in long-term care is really, really necessary. There are so many different things to think about, and we're going to get into that when we talk about Medicare and Medicaid. There are so many different things to think about that we just, or I certainly do not have, the knowledge and the training to try to tackle. And it's really important to reach out to professionals. So a lot of people with younger onset Alzheimer's are still working. They receive that diagnosis while they are still working. And just because you received or a family member received a diagnosis of younger onset Alzheimer's, that does not mean you have to stop working. It does not mean that you have to stop doing your job, but it does mean that you need to keep communication open. So you do need to tell your employer that you have Alzheimer's disease, and you don't need to tell them for any other reason other than so you can get the accommodations and resources that you need. So there are tons of workplace accommodation options, and the person that you would talk to is your HR manager. They know so much about accommodations, and when someone has a disability or a disease under the Americans with Disabilities Act, they have to accommodate you. So once they've learned that you have Alzheimer's, they have to make those accommodations. But you're going to have to provide documentation from your physician. You're going to probably meet regularly to review performance, and then you're going to start to plan a transition. So what does it look like when this job maybe becomes too many hours, or it becomes a little bit too complicated, or the workload is too much? Then how do you transition out of it? And if you go back to those accommodations, there are tons of accommodations that workplaces can make. They can make it so you're working less hours, so you're doing some job sharing. I mean, there's just really a lot that you can explore with HR. That's really what they're there for, really. So if you receive a diagnosis while employed, there are benefits that your employer may offer. So disability insurance provides income for an employee who can no longer work due to illness or injury. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk more about disability insurance. So you can also take FMLA. So if FMLA is Family Medical Leave Act, and you can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave a year for family medical conditions or for your own medical conditions. So if you have a family member and that you are caring for that has Alzheimer's disease, you can take FMLA and still keep your job. So if you need to step away from work and care for them, you can do that under FMLA. COBRA is a way that you can keep your insurance. So it was signed into law in 1985. It's a federal law. And it allows individuals who, after they have lost their job, to continue their insurance for 18, 29, or 36 months after leaving a job. So you have to pay for that insurance, right? It's not a benefit, you know, it's not paid for by your employer anymore, but you don't lose it. So if you lose your job, you don't automatically lose your insurance. So let's talk a little bit about Social Security disability benefits. So they're paid to you and to certain members of your family if you're insured. And that means that you worked long enough and paid Social Security taxes. They're administered by the Social Security Administration, and they make eligible payments to, monthly payments to eligible disabled individuals. And this is a significant benefit for people with younger onset Alzheimer's. You're covered, and we have a slide on that, under the Compassionate Allowances initiative. So one of the things to think about is this is not, you know, a government program that's giving you money that isn't yours. This is your money. You paid into this system. You paid taxes. You are simply getting what you paid back, and you're just getting it a little early. So the Compassionate Allowances Initiative is a way to hurry up the process of SSDI and SSI. So either Social Security Disability Insurance or Social Security Insurance. And what it does is normally this process can take like 6 to 12 months, especially with the SSDI. It's a long process. But Alzheimer's disease and younger onset Alzheimer's disease is listed as a disability, and it's listed under this Compassionate Allowances Act. So it hurries up the process. So instead of waiting 6 to 12 months, you can get your SSDI much, much faster. So this is a really, really good, program. And I know that the Alzheimer's Association advocated very, very fiercely to get Alzheimer's disease put under this initiative. So let's talk a little bit about Medicare and Medicaid. And I don't know about you, but Medicare and Medicaid confuses me to no end. And I had a somebody who used to write tax laws at one of my presentations like a year ago when we were still in person. And he told me he wrote tax code. See, I don't even know what it's called. But he told me that dealing with his wife's Medicare almost broke him. And, you know, I mean, he used to work for the IRS. So if you're confused by this, don't feel bad. So again, it's a government insurance program, and Medicare is age-based. It's for people 65 years or older. People under 65 can qualify for Medicare if they have been receiving SSDI for at least 24 months. And I wrote down a note about that because I thought that was really interesting. So normally when someone, if somebody is applying for Medicare or Medicaid, there's a wait. But if they've been on SSDI for 24 months because of the compassionate allowance, then as soon as that 2 years of SSDI is over, they're automatically in Medicare. So they're automatically receiving Medicare. So it also is available to anybody any age if they're at end-stage renal disease. So it's federally administered. It does not pay for any long-term care. So Medicare does not pay for any long-term care. Medicaid is a government assistance program, and it's need-based. So it's income and needs-based. They look at your income and assets, and it doesn't have anything to do with age. You can be over 65, you can be under 65, and it's state administered. So we have a really good Medicaid program here in Washington State, but I know it's different in every state, and it does pay for long-term care nursing homes and nursing services. So that is the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. And if you forget it in 2 seconds, you're not alone. Don't worry, we can mail you the slides. I myself sometimes forget these things. So the other thing to think about when it comes to financial planning and planning for the future is the difference between a living will or a living trust and a will. So a will, and one of the things I want to mention is there's a surprising amount of people who do not have a will. And it's not just people who are dealing with younger onset Alzheimer's or who are dealing with other progressive diseases. It's a lot of people, surprisingly enough, do not have a will. And not having a will can really throw your family members and your loved ones into a tailspin because they don't have any way not only to make decisions, but they don't have any way for anything to be settled, and it makes the process much longer. So it's really important to have that will. It names an executor and beneficiaries, but it only takes place after a person is deceased. A living trust is different, and it's a lot more flexible. It names a trustee, and it provides instructions on how to manage a person's estate. And it can include a broad range of property, and it helps avoid probate. So probate is that time after a person is gone where they are deciding if the will is valid. They don't have to decide if the will is valid because there is a living trust. It also allows people to tap into money that they may not have been able to tap into before to pay for care. And the other thing it does is it specifies whether a trust will end when the last beneficiary dies or it will continue to benefit others. And again, this is something to discuss with either an elder law attorney or a financial planner. There are, I'll probably just annoy the heck out of you guys because there are just things that we just don't think about. And I've noticed, especially since working for the Alzheimer's Association, a lot of people really want to try to do this really intricate financial planning or legal planning themselves. And it's probably better to entrust it to a professional. So here are some tips for organizing. You want to make sure that you're talking about your finances and future care wishes. It's not a fun discussion to have, but the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. Organize and review important documents. Get help from financial and legal advisors. Estimate the costs. Look at all of your insurance options. Consider all your benefits that your employer has to offer and possibly personal property as income. Find out what government programs you're available to apply to, so what options are there for you. Explore financial assistance, tax breaks, and low cost and community services. So those are some tips for organizing. This is not a fast process, so trying to just get all this in order, and instead of thinking, okay, I've got to have this all done by next week, really just break it down into easy and manageable steps, right? You know, what's that old joke? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Although I hope nobody really eats elephants. So the resources resources, one of the things we mentioned is finding an elder law attorney, and we're going to have a website for you guys for that resource. But if you have issues such as disability planning, guardianship, probate and estate planning, make sure that you're discussing your healthcare issues, your decision making, your financial decision making, and long-term care coverage. And I have had the benefit of talking to some elder law attorneys, you know, just in being part of the Alzheimer's Association when they've done presentations for us. And I can't tell you how knowledgeable they are. It's just amazing. Okay, so we've got some resources available for you. The first one is the Dementia Care Roadmap. It's a guide for family and care partners. This is put on by our Dementia Action Collaborative, which is kind of like the who's who of Alzheimer's and dementia. And it is a booklet. It's actually a really nice booklet. And it's kind of an A to Z, what to do when you find out you have Alzheimer's, what to do if you expect Alzheimer's. It talks about diagnosis. It talks about early detection. It talks about treatments. It talks about planning. And then we actually have a new one, and it's down here at the bottom. I couldn't fit it under the roadmap, and it is a toolkit for just legal and financial planning. Now, it is not available yet. It's not printed, but if you go to that website, you can get it and download it, and it is invaluable. We also have the Washington State Alzheimer's Association, or just our National Alzheimer's Association, 1-800-272-3900. This is our helpline number. We have master level social workers answering that helpline 24 hours a day. We've got naela.org and lawhelp.org. Those are both free resources, free legal resources. We've got our statewide health insurance benefit advisors, and then Washington DSHS Aging and Long-Term Care Support Administration. So again, if you want this information, excuse me, we can email it to you. And all of this information can also be found in that legal planning toolkit. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and see if you guys have any questions I can answer. I don't see any in the chat. So